We're all told the same thing growing up. Winners never quit and quitters never win. It's on posters, it's in movies. But what if that's just plain wrong? What if one of the most important skills you can have for success isn't just about endless grit, but about knowing exactly when to quit? Let's dive into this idea, the strategic power of quitting.
This quote just nails it, right? Picking the right challenge is only half the battle. The other half, the one we almost never talk about, is knowing when it's time to climb back down. And to really see what this means when the stakes are as high as they get, our first story takes us to the very top of the world. Okay, so let's meet 3 climbers you've probably never heard of. Dr. Stuart Hutchinson, Dr. John Task, and Lou Kosciuszko. Back in 1996, they were on an expedition to summit Mount Everest. This is the dream of a lifetime. But on the world's highest mountain, the line between that dream and an absolute nightmare is razor thin.
Here's something wild about climbing Everest. Getting to the top, that's only half the job. The descent, coming down, is where things get really, really dangerous. So to manage this insane risk, every single expedition sets what's called a turnaround time. It's a hard deadline, a drop-dead time. If you haven't reached the summit by then, you must turn back. No excuses, no matter how close you think you are. It's the only rule that can save you when darkness falls and your body starts to shut down.
And believe me, this rule exists for a very, very good reason. An unbelievable 8 times more climbers die on Everest on the way down than they do on the way up. Just let that sink in for a second. The most dangerous part isn't the big, heroic climb to the summit, it's the exhausted stumble back to camp when you're low on oxygen, you're tired, and your brain just isn't working right.
So back to our 3 climbers. It's 11:30 a.m. on summit day. They are way up in the death zone. But they look up and see this massive traffic jam of other climbers. They do some quick math and realize there is no way they're going to make their 1 p.m. turnaround time. So with the peak right there, so close they can taste it, they make an absolutely gut-wrenching decision. They quit. They honor the deadline and they turn around.
Hutchison, Task, and Kosciuszko, they all made it home alive. Others on the mountain that day, people who pushed right past that deadline, they didn't. And yet, we don't know the names of the guys who made the smart call. We tell stories about tragic perseverance, but we completely ignore the life-saving wisdom of quitting. So that gets you thinking, right? If quitting is so often the right move, why is it so incredibly hard for us to do?
Well, the answer lies in a couple of really powerful psychological traps. They're these little glitches in our thinking that keep us stuck on a losing path, long after we should have gotten off. And this doesn't just happen on mountains. This affects our careers, our relationships, even billion-dollar projects.
So the first trap is something called escalation of commitment. It's that little voice in your head that whispers, "Oh, but I've come too far to turn back now." It doesn't matter if you're in a dead-end job or a failing project. The more time, money, or energy you've poured into something, the harder it is to let it go, even when all the signs are screaming at you to stop. And the engine driving that whole trap is the sunk cost fallacy. This is just flawed logic, where we confuse how much we've already spent with how likely something is to succeed in the future. A perfect, painful example is the California high-speed rail project. The budget just ballooned from $33 billion to over $100 billion. And officials actually said that stopping the project would be an unconscionable mishandling of taxpayers' dollars because they'd already invested so much. That's the sunk cost fallacy, textbook. And let's see how this plays out in the business world, with a story you definitely know, Blockbuster. They saw streaming coming, they knew it was the future. In fact, Netflix even tried to sell themselves to Blockbuster. But Blockbuster just couldn't bring themselves to quit their old model of physical stores and late fees. They persisted their way straight into bankruptcy. Now Netflix, they became masters of quitting. They quit their own incredibly profitable business, DVDs by mail, to go all in on streaming. One company was trapped by its past, the other quit its way to market domination. Okay, so we get the problem. These biases are powerful. But how do we actually fight them? Well, let's look at some really clever solutions that were developed inside one of the most innovative places on Earth. Welcome to X, which is Alphabet's Moonshot Factory. It's run by a guy named Astro Teller, and their home mission isn't just to make things a little bit better, like a 10% improvement. No, they are swinging for the fences. They want 10x impact. They're trying to solve the world's biggest problems. And to do that, you have to take massive risks. And to take massive risks without going broke, you have to be the best in the world at one thing, quitting. Just like Teller says here, getting to know as fast as possible is actually the secret to their success. They actively try to kill their own best ideas. Why? Because every single dollar and every hour they save on a project that's doomed to fail is a resource they can now put into the next big idea. So you see, for them, quitting isn't failure.
It's a resource allocation strategy.
So how do they do it?
Well, one of their coolest mental models is called monkeys and pedestals. It's actually pretty simple. Imagine you want to train a monkey to stand on a pedestal and recite Shakespeare. In any big project, you've got the easy parts, that's building the pedestal. And then you've got the really hard make-or-break problems, that's training the monkey. Most people would build the impressive-looking pedestal first to feel like they're making progress. But at X, they do the exact opposite. They find the hardest, ugliest problem, the monkey, and they tackle that first. Because if you can't solve for the monkey, who cares how great your pedestal is? You kill the project before you waste any more time.
Another amazing tool they use is setting kill criteria before a project even begins. These are objective, predefined conditions for when to pull the plug. And the best ones combine a state with a date. So, for example, if we can't get this prototype to achieve X performance, that's the state, by the end of this quarter, that's the date, we kill the project, period. And what this does, which is genius, is it takes all the emotion and wishful thinking out of the decision. You're not giving up, you're just following a rule you made for yourself when you were thinking clearly.
All right, let's look at a story of how this plays out in the wild, and it's a big one. This is the story of how quitting a passion project, a total heartbreak, led to one of the most valuable software companies we've seen in years. So Stuart Butterfield and his team poured years of their lives and millions of dollars into building this really unique online game called Glitch. And it had this small group of fans who were absolutely obsessed with it. But here was the problem. For every one person who loved it, 19 others would log on, play for a few minutes, and just leave forever. A 95% bounce rate for new users. You can't build a real business on that.
Even though their marketing was bringing in more users and some of the surface-level numbers looked okay, Butterfield knew in his gut that the core problem was never going to be solved. So he made the agonizing decision to shut the whole thing down. And he said something really interesting later, that quitting on time often feels like you're quitting too early. But he saw the truth and he acted on it, even when it was painful.
And here's where the story gets incredible. When Butterfield quit Glitch, he freed up his amazing team and all that capital. So they looked around and decided to try and sell this little internal chat tool they had built for themselves, just to collaborate better. That tool was called Slack, and just 8 years after quitting his failed game, Butterfield sold Slack to Salesforce for almost $28 billion. Quitting Glitch wasn't the end of his story. It was the thing that made the story of Slack possible.
So let's bring all this home. What's the big idea here? It's that our whole cultural obsession with never give up can actually be a trap. It can hold us back from our biggest successes.
The legendary Silicon Valley investor, Ron Conway, he's funded hundreds of companies, and he says that some of his proudest moments are when he helps a founder realize it's time to quit their startup. Why? His reasoning is simple. Life's too short to spend your best years and your incredible talent on something that just isn't working, especially when a much better opportunity might be waiting right around the corner.
So we really have to reframe how we think about this. Quitting is not a failure, it is a skill. The most successful people and companies quit all the time. They're constantly quitting strategies and projects so they can reallocate their most precious resources, their time, their energy, their focus, on something new. It's about freeing yourself from a path with a low ceiling so you can find a path with a much, much higher one.
And that brings us to the final question. And this one is for you. Think about your own life right now. Your job, a side project, a goal you're chasing. What are you persisting at? Maybe out of habit or because of how much you've already invested. What is the glitch in your life that might be preventing you from finding your Slack?